It's unbelievable. Just watching the news, and it's heartbreaking to see the impact that the shutdown of the Keystone pipelines having on the workers who had a great living going, had tens of thousands of jobs, just gone at the stroke of a perverse pen by the Biden administration. It was absolutely disgusting. And it just makes me think, in what way, in what facet is this not a coup d'etat? I mean, I remember calling it that back in March, just from the shutdowns. It seemed pretty apparent. Everything is going so well, and China was being obliterated by President Trump. I mean, in so many ways, America was having a revival in the corporate world and in defense and every way. Jobs, things were going beautifully. Even Soros had admitted that Trump had essentially defeated them. And that was back in October of 2019. And then all of a sudden, all this happens, this COVID. And remember this, okay, you don't even hear about her anymore. Remember Dr. Li Meng Yan? She was a Chinese virologist. She actually fled Hong Kong to the United States to warn people about the pandemic. Very credible scientist who did the early work on COVID-19. And she was talking about the fact that, alleging that the Wuhan wet market was nothing but a smokescreen, and that this was built in a laboratory. And she came to warn us. And all of a sudden, this was all over the news back in October. You don't hear anything about a conclusion or what happened to this woman. But it's like in every step. It makes me think of the movie, remember back in the 80s, if you were alive back then, Red Dawn. And we had this vision in a healthy and justified fear of communism and the evils behind it during the Cold War, as that movie had come out. And you see all these towns, and one town in particular, and the Soviets parachuting from the sky out of nowhere, and suddenly it's a communist invasion, and America was turned upside down, and it was all about fighting off the communists. We had no idea that the real Red Dawn was going to transpire like this, without the Chinese or the communists having to parachute or fire a shot, as Khrushchev had predicted would one day be the case. And so you have this mysterious virus that comes out of the blue from China. And then suddenly every single thing that is happening is as though they had done it themselves, like they were puppet masters. Everything that we are seeing done, it's like the Democrat Party and the leftist communist media are nothing but their puppets. They shut down, they send us a virus, they shut down all of the businesses, they destroyed hundreds of thousands of small businesses and the livelihoods of millions of Americans just at the swipe of a pen. The heart of America is small business, and they have decimated it. And what they're doing to families, keeping them at home. And of course, importantly, the treatment the churches have had. Like any true communist country, you've got to shut down the churches. You cannot have a people practicing faith in a communist country. That's unacceptable. All of that being done. And then you look at all the actions being taken towards our energy independence that we achieved under the Trump administration, with the Keystone pipeline, with the fracking, seeing the oil prices come down, gasoline prices come down. Now, all at the stroke of an unconstitutional pen waving, Joe Biden throws all that into chaos and just shuts it down, costing all these jobs and, importantly, the independence, now the dependence that we'll have on the communist countries like China and like Russia, who are oil rich, so we can go and be dependent upon them. It's absolutely clear. And then the silencing, again, you can't talk about these things because the Chinese communists have totally overcome our media. It's like they are bought and paid for by them via the Democrat Party. You can't talk about any of this. And then the social media companies, just a handful of individuals and corporations controlling the whole thing. I saw Peter Navarro's, I think his Twitter account, or it might have been Facebook. I think it was Twitter, just shut down the other day. He was obviously very upset. There was no violation. There was no warning. Just shut down arbitrarily. Another one. People being silenced. It is a true communist coup in every sense of the word. They're threatening. They're categorizing anyone who dissents like true communists. They are categorizing anyone who talks out against them as domestic terrorists. A journalist just this week arrested for making memes. Absolutely unbelievable what is coming, and it's coming quickly. You know, we've talked. I've used the frogs in a gradually heating up kettle of water, where we've been apathetic for years as we've watched these things come, and we've shrugged it off. The inculcation of our children, decades of broken homes, failed parenting, families sending their kids off to be indoctrinated at government communist-run schools through out of the teachers' unions. And now we've got the greatest generation that's pretty much dying off rapidly. And these kids who've gone through this propagandizing through government schools and communist media and music, and all these communist artists, indoctrinating them thoroughly. And now they're voting. And they despise their liberty. They are literally celebrating the fact that they are going to live under tyranny. They don't believe it, but that's what they're celebrating. And they don't see the ominous warnings. I mean, we look at things like the Holocaust Museum. The very people that are implementing the tyranny, they've said over and over again, never again, never again. It's like a platitude when you look at things like the Holocaust Museum and the atrocities that occurred under totalitarianism, fascism in that case. They say never again, but every single thing, every single evil, every single suppression, every bit of coercion, they are celebrating, implementing, and it is nothing but words, and it's a travesty. But that water, that kettle of water is about to boil, and the only thing that we have, well, number one, it's God. We need to be on our knees and repenting for the sins of this nation, the things that we've done for the past decades. We need to acknowledge that. And also, we need to coalesce our states, our God-fearing, Constitution-venerating states. These legislatures need to get together, and they need to codify into law, each respectively, laws that prohibit the censorship of their citizens on the basis of political beliefs or religious beliefs. They need to make that into law, and we need to have articles drafted so that all the states are on board and do likewise legislation, and literally shut down access to these social media sites until when they violate the basic fundamental tenets of the Bill of Rights. And until they reverse their actions, they should not be granted access to the markets in the states. That's 100% within their right to do that on a statewide basis. States have the right to say who does business in their borders. That's their right. And I believe that when you have clear evidence, they're not even hiding it, that these companies are shutting down access and violating their agreements with companies like Parler based on political persuasion. That should be an illegal act. Amazon for shutting down those services, they should be barred from operating in the state until such repugnant behavior is corrected. I don't mean just their streaming, I mean everything. No more operating in the state at all. That's a huge market, Florida. But they might be obstinate enough to hold out and refuse to comply if it's one state. But if the states get together and form articles of confederation, I'm not talking secession. There's no need for us to secede. They seceded. The left has seceded. They are doing it every day, violating our rights, our Constitution. And they have no inhibition about doing it. If every state put into law a similar policy where they're going to shut down access to, say, Amazon services or to Facebook's, every ISP must block them when Facebook deplatforms people for their political or religious beliefs. If every state did that is God-fearing, Constitution venerating, you're talking maybe 30 states, give or take, that would make a huge impact. And that's what needs to be done. We don't have time to play games. We don't have time to say, well, we couldn't do without these services. What would happen? You know what the alternative is. Total, outright tyranny and freaking gulags. It's time to get serious. And if states don't see this, we're done. This calls for the most serious legislation we have ever seen. We need articles of confederation between states with certain fundamental protections that when the Leviathan is going to start usurping and threatening their respective citizens, we stand together as one against those anti-constitutional actions, period. That's the only way. You can't wait till next election. We know what that means. Nothing. That's nothing but a delusion at this point. When we see how brazen this evil actually is and what it's willing to do, it will stop at nothing at this point. The Red Dawn is here.